This is the Relationships on Reddit podcast. I'm your host, Alexander Grace, and I just want to welcome you. Wherever you're listening, whether you're driving, you're doing chores around the house, you're going for a walk, and whatever you're listening on, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, whatever it may be, I just want to say welcome. We've got 3 awesome stories for you today. The first one is a man who accidentally says, "I love you" during sex, and his girlfriend doesn't know if he means it or if it just sort of spilled out of him in the heat of the moment. Our second story is of a man who was jacking off to nudes of his ex-girlfriend on Facebook, and his girlfriend is understandably feeling very jealous. And our last story is of a man who comes back from the army and then gets a job as a handyman on a college, and he's being objectified by all the women, and this is not going down particularly well with his girlfriend, who's feeling extremely envious of all of the female attention that he's getting. So, with no ado whatsoever, let's jump right into the first story, which is titled, "He Said I Love You on Accident." Background. He, 20-year-old male, is my friends with benefit, and we have really good sex. I, 18-year-old female, mean completely sexually compatible, and we 9 out of 10, we come at the same time. Sex got even better as we made some adjustments and have been communicating more about what we like and what we don't like. We are also good friends and have had deep talks and can hold conversations on things other than sex. We have spent the night over at each other's place a few times. So basically, we were doing missionary, and he's on top of me and is all the way in. We're going slower, and we're both moaning and whispering sex stuff. You know, fuck, you feel good, the typical stuff we say when it feels good. So then he says, "I love you," between moans. I grabbed him tighter to pull him into me more, but other than that, I acted like it was just casual sex talk and just ignored it until we finished. After we finished, we cuddled as usual, and no one mentioned it. Has anyone ever accidentally said "I love you" because the sex felt good? I'm trying to figure out if it was a mistake or what. People have read it. Should I ask him if he meant to say that? And if so, how do I ask? It's such an odd question to ask someone. It's okay if he didn't, because I take it very seriously, which is why I didn't say it back. But if he has feelings, I feel like I should know, so we can reevaluate what we're doing. And there's our story. Alright, let's start with the fact, I know this is not the main point of this post, but she says that 9 out of 10 times they come at the same time, like a simultaneous orgasm. That is absolutely extraordinary. A simultaneous orgasm is extraordinarily difficult to achieve, and I don't necessarily know that it depends on compatibility. I think you can be completely sexually compatible and not necessarily have, a 90% success rate of simultaneous orgasms. So I don't know, I'm a little bit suspicious whether or not that's true. That just seems like an extraordinary figure. I hope that she appreciates that if that's what it is, and that she doesn't take that for granted. I don't think all of her relationships are going to be like that. But forgive me for being a little bit cynical, but she's only 18 years old. I don't know how well she knows her body. She may be thinking that she's having an orgasm, but it might not be a real orgasm, which to my male audience might sound absolutely ludicrous. Of course she knows what an orgasm is, but you'd be surprised at how confusing that can be for young women. Like, sometimes you ask a girl, well, don't go around asking girls this, young girls this, it's a bit weird, but you'd have conversations with girls back in high school, and you'd say, have you ever had an orgasm? And you might get a response like, "I think so," or "maybe," or "I think I had one once." And you're like, how was this possible? When you have an orgasm, but I think for women, their orgasms are of an entirely different frequency to ours, and it's difficult for them to tell sometimes. So, look, she's got a 9 out of 10 success rate with simultaneous orgasms. Maybe. Personally, I'm skeptical. If it's true, congratulations. That's absolutely extraordinary. But, of course, that is not the main point of this post. What we want to talk about is whether or not he meant it when he said, "I love you." Alright, so during sex, you are in a completely different state of mind, and you can blurt out all kinds of stuff. You can say, "I love you." That is an absolutely possible thing. I personally wouldn't read that much into it, because it's during sex that you kind of have permission in a way to, it's just one of those social things that to say things that you wouldn't ordinarily say. You find some couples, they're sweet to each other and talk in really gorgeous language that they probably wouldn't in their real life. But when they come time to have sex, there's a sort of special intimacy that takes over, and they're really nice to each other. You can find that. probably more common, but basically operating on the same principle, is that couples will talk dirty to each other during sex in a way that they would never outside of the bedroom. If you go onto Google and look up, women who enjoy being called like a slut or a whore, or like being degraded in the bedroom, you'll find all kinds of articles from women confessing this exact phenomenon. They might consider themselves, strong women, feminists even, outside of the bedroom, but inside the bedroom, they like to be called all kinds of crazy, degrading names. And the psychology of that is really, really interesting. I won't go into it in full detail here. I'll save that for another discussion. But there is this set of special rules that basically apply to the bedroom. And I think that in terms of a chicken and egg situation, I think that the passion came before the social convention of that. I think that when you're in the middle of sex, it's very possible for your mind to just sort of get carried away and for things to just spill out. This has actually become something that you see referenced in a lot of TV shows, often in a humorous way. I first saw it in this show, terrible show. I don't like it, but I did watch it way, way, way back when. I think I was in high school when I was watching it, so it must be an old show. If anyone remembers Sex and the City, about those 4 30-plus-year-old women who just have like lots of sex in New York. Terrible show, but my point is there was an episode I remember where there was a guy, and every time he came to orgasm, he would say, "You fucking bitch, you fucking whore." And the female character, I can't remember her name, is like, "Oh my God." Anyway, she brings it to his attention. And he's not even aware of the fact that he does that. He's horrified. And then, the next time they're having sex, he's like got his mouth like all screwed up and he's desperately trying not to say it. But, she's like, just let it out. And he just sort of screams at her. And the episode ends with the voiceover saying he decided to stop seeing the girl and start seeing a therapist. It was funny. I liked that. That was clever. More recently, I think I saw something about this on Family Guy, where Brian the dog's just had sex with a girl, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry I called you a whore" at the end there. I just need that to finish. Which is of a similar idea, the idea that in order to have this orgasm, this kind of weird speech comes out, things you wouldn't say in ordinary life. And I hope people are watching that Netflix show Big Mouth. Love that show. Highest possible recommendation. I know this is a tangent, but if you haven't seen the show Big Mouth on Netflix, definitely watch it. But the character Coach Steve has sex, and during his orgasm, stuff spills out of him. He just blurts out, "Thank you, I'm sorry. Thank you, I'm sorry. Thank you, I'm sorry." I love that. He's like thanking her for the sex and apologizing. It's just extraordinary. But the fact that you see it in these TV shows, it means it's referencing something that people have seen in their real life. This is very much a real phenomena. And, she's lucky that he said, "I love you," and not something else, because sometimes, hateful things can spill out. There are stories of men saying really mean shit during sex, and women too. Saying like, "Fuck you," or "I hate you," or "You dirty bitch," or just something with really negative intention. And if you're not prepared for it, if you don't understand much about the psychology of sex, that could absolutely take you off guard. You don't really know how to take it. But understand, if this is something that you've experienced in your personal life, do a little bit more research about shame, because understanding sexual pleasure and understanding the negative emotion of shame, they kind of go hand in hand. You need to understand one to really appreciate the other. Because it's really fun to experiment with releasing shame during sex. So the basic theory goes like this, that you're going to want to do during sex the very thing that you're most ashamed of. So if you think there are certain words that are really naughty, really, really dirty, and you should absolutely never say them, they're too taboo, they're sort of forbidden, then you're going to want to say them during sex. Because if you do the very thing that you're feeling most ashamed of, and you're doing that during pleasure and you're getting approval from it, someone else is into it, they're enjoying it, that's when the most pleasure is achieved. It's in the releasing of the shame that you feel really, really good. So if you've got a guy who considers himself like a modern, progressive man who respects women, he might think that the worst thing you could ever do is to slut shame a woman. And I could never call a woman a slut. That would just be the height of terrible behavior. Well, I can guarantee that during sex, he's going to love calling his partner a slut because that's going to feel so shameful. And if she's into it, that taboo pleasure of breaking the conventions, that's going to be highly erotic. So, saying like something that would seem strange, like, oh, fuck you, or I hate you, or anything like that during sex, it might sound weird, but when you understand that principle, the shame principle that underlies it, it begins to make a lot more sense. So when he says, I love you, I actually think that it's probably something a little bit like that. It just sort of spilled out. Now, maybe he has genuine feelings. Maybe it was just fun to say it. But I love you, there's a lot of importance that we assign to those three words when they're put in sequence like that. Like, it means something different to everybody else. But to him, I would almost guarantee that he would be frightened of saying that, like it's the sort of thing. And most people are scared of saying I love you, especially for the first time. There's a certain surrender, like a psychological gift that you're giving to another person when you say those words. So to have it spill out during sex, that would have been highly pleasurable. Like, oh, what a release. Like, these words I've been scared of saying, but I just let them come right out. And in that, there was a lot of pleasure. So personally, I doubt that it meant anything to him. I think it was just words that came out during sex. What's more interesting, potentially, is to look at the way that she has obsessed about this, to the point where she has, posted this all up on Reddit to try and get some more feedback on this. I would imagine that this was a lot more significant to her than it was to him. But we can't say that for guarantee. But as I read this story, couldn't help but ask myself, why is this a friends with benefits arrangement? She says that they get on really well. They're compatible, sexually compatible, of course, but they speak about other things. They've slept over at each other's house. I'm thinking, well, surely she's going to want to be his girlfriend. What would hold them back from actually having a romantic relationship at this point? All of the elements seem there. So why are they stuck in this kind of booty call dynamic? And it brings up this question, can women have unemotional sex? Are they really capable of not getting attached during sex? I think that we look at a couple of examples, like when women sleep with Alpha Chad, when they're having sex with a guy they've just met, just for the experience, or maybe he's a celebrity, or they're traveling, and it's a sort of once-off type thing. That absolutely does happen. That is a real phenomenon, and from evolutionary psychology, we know that when women are doing that, it's often about trying to secure, at least on a subconscious level, of course, usually they're using protection, but they're trying to secure the sperm of a high-value alpha male, and they just want this quick, hot sex, and to feel really desirable, and it's just about that experience. That's absolutely real, but that's not what's going on here. She's not just having this unemotional sex with this one guy in a one-night stand. With a booty call arrangement or a friends with benefits like this, they're clearly friends. They're seeing each other over a long period of time, and they get on. So I'm thinking, what's going on here? I would guess that she's thinking about this I love you statement because it's probably on her mind that she would like this to be a little bit more than friends with benefits. I definitely think that she's keen. And this is not just speculation. I'm basing my prediction here on the studies that have been done on this phenomenon. I'm going to mention one of these studies a little bit later when I talk about my sponsorship for this channel, because there's a video done about booty calls that specifically goes into why women have difficulty staying unemotional during sex and what they're actually looking for in an arrangement like what these two people have. But I'll tell you more about that soon. After I go through a story, if you're new to the podcast, what I like to do is read out some of the comments from Reddit and see what other people thought of this story. So I'm going to go ahead and get onto that now. First comment. It doesn't really count. I sometimes say, oh my God, but that doesn't mean I'm not an atheist. All right, well, that's not a serious comment, but that's really funny. Of course, we use "oh my God" not necessarily to express religious fervor. It just kind of comes out of you, even if you're an atheist. And that's the same point. I think that when you just say "I love you," it just came out of you during sex. It's because sex is it's very intimate. It's beautiful in the way that you're vulnerable to another person. You're naked. you're showing them your genitals. For women, you're accepting genitals like inside you. It's an extraordinarily intimate and vulnerable act. And I think that to kind of heighten the pleasure of feeling like you're surrendering that much to another person, to say, I love you, could just heighten the pleasure. I think that's what's going on here. Next comment. I don't think we can tell you if he has feelings. Talk to him. Personally, I can't get in bed with someone if I don't love them, at least on some level. That's why I know friends with benefits wouldn't work for me. Thankfully, I'm married, so I don't even have to consider that. Yeah, and this is what the question is. Is the world filled with women who are capable of having sex and not feeling any love for a man, and then women who aren't capable of that? Or are all women basically the same as this commenter woman, that she can't really have sex with them unless they're in love, at least on some kind of level? But you've got women who are in denial about that, or committing violence to what's natural to their psyche. And given how many people out there are not acting in accordance with their true nature, I think that that is an interesting thing to speculate on. I do believe in individuality, and I think that there's a lot of room across the spectrum, especially the sexual spectrum, for how people come about. But it seems to be a very, very strong trend, and the study that I'm going to talk about later certainly reinforces that women have a lot of difficulty detaching emotions from sex. So yeah, I'm personally skeptical. I think that she probably does want to be in a relationship with this guy, and that if it's a friends with benefits arrangement, it's probably because that's what he wanted, not what she wanted. Next comment. I had a friends with benefits that had an I love you kink. What? An I love you kink. He didn't actually mean it, but he loved saying it because it turned him on. He said it felt wrong to say it, which is why it felt so good. Perhaps thrilling. I personally found it really weird because we ended up dating, but the whole concept messed up our dynamic. That is so interesting. He had an I love you kink. He said it felt wrong to say it, which is why it felt so good. Well, that is, in their own way, this commenter is just elucidating the concept that I spoke about before, that it feels good to do the thing that feels wrong. So, if it feels wrong to call a woman a slut during sex, call her a slut. It'll heighten your pleasure. If it feels just unthinkable to ever hit a woman, maybe spank her butt or give her a light slap across the face. Overcoming that taboo and overcoming that shame is going to heighten your pleasure. For this guy, if it feels wrong to say, I love you, then say it during sex. That's your kink. And it's going to heighten the pleasure. I wonder if that really is a kink, or if most men would find that. Probably most men would actually enjoy saying, I love you, during sex, whether it's with their partner or a one-night stand or even like a hooker, might just feel good to do it because of the taboo nature of it. But perhaps most men don't do it because they are intensely aware of the trouble they're going to get themselves into in terms of emotional entanglements with a woman if they do start saying that. That's an interesting one. So listeners at home, I wonder just ask yourself if you enjoy saying I love you during sex. And my final comment for this story. Oh God, I accidentally did this early in my relationship with my boyfriend. Now we say it all the time, but the first time it slipped out, it was so embarrassing. We were having sex, and right as I was about to orgasm, I love you escaped. He ignored it and continued with the sex talk, and I was grateful. I tried to cover it by immediately rephrasing it as, I love the way you fuck me. Oh, it's basically the same thing. Since he didn't ask about it, I hoped maybe he didn't notice, but he brought it up months later, and we laughed about it. That's really sweet. But yeah, there's just further evidence that I love you can just escape sometimes during sex. You're not in your right state of mind. It's like a drug experience. You're kind of spinning out in pleasure and a little bit more access to your subconscious, perhaps. Very interesting. So that's the first story, kind of a light one to get us started. Now, before we go into the second story, I want to talk about the sponsor for this podcast, which is Man-Made Media. That is a production company that I'm a part of. What we do at Man-Made Media is we create premium products, things that you won't find anywhere for free. This is a paid product. What's really fantastic about this product and Man-Made Media is it's all based on science. So what you hear from me usually, like on this podcast or on my YouTube channel, is my opinions. And I'd like to think that my opinions are based on facts, and I like to do a lot of research, but these videos are pure fact. It's pure science. What they do is they take real scientific studies, real research that's being done in academia on the field of human relationships, sexuality, evolutionary psychology, and then they explain the results of those studies using simple animations, totally easy to understand. The latest videos is about booty calls, on how men and women look for different things when it comes to a booty call, what they're looking for in a partner. It goes through the backgrounds of this study that was done in 2018, goes through the methods, the results, the conclusions. When you finish watching this video, it's like you've read the entire study yourself. And no one has time to read, hundreds of pages of an academic study, or not hundreds of pages, but however long it is. What you want is something, you want to pay a little bit of money, like $5, that's how much it costs, and someone's done the hard work for you in picking out the salient points and presenting it to you in an easy to understand manner. So because I know, since you're listening to this podcast, you're interested in relationships, you're interested in gender dynamics, you're going to absolutely love this video, guaranteed. So check it out. This is a great way to support the podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, check it out in the description box. If you're on Spotify or iTunes, or you're just out somewhere, all you need to do is go onto Google and type this into your search bar, man-made-media.myshopify.com. That's where you're going to find the video. $5, check it out, support the podcast. Awesome. All right, let's get on. Let's go on to our second story. This one is called My 28-year-old female boyfriend, a 26-year-old male, fapped to his ex after I asked him to come to bed. All right, let's get into it. Boyfriend of 3 years and I currently live together and have a 1.5-year-old daughter. This is going to sound weird, but our walls are super thin. After I asked him if he wanted to come to bed with me and he said no, I literally heard him masturbating on the PC, which is right outside our bedroom. I have no issue with porn as long as it's not to exes or Facebook people we know, etc., and he knows this. I was curious as I don't normally hear him, and he has always said that he doesn't watch porn because it looks too fake. He has even said this to friends, so I believe it. Today, I looked at his PC history and opened was old messages to and from his ex from when they were together, with pics of her nudes open in history on Facebook. This crushed me. He knew how I felt about jerking it to real people, let alone his ex. Is this something normal? I know he wouldn't cheat with her, but this feels like emotional-fueled fapping, and I feel betrayed. It upsets me that instead of coming to me, he chose to look at his ex's nudes. As a recent new mum to his baby girl, I'm already struggling to accept my new body, and we rarely have sex due to the baby. Any insight whether I should get over myself or have a talk with him? The TLDR? Boyfriend chose to masturbate to nudes of his ex instead of come to bed with me. It feels wrong and I feel hurt, but don't know if it's worth bringing up or getting over it myself. Should I ask him to delete her as friends and delete her messages and pics, or is that too extreme? This particular story also comes with an update. So I gave him a chance to tell the truth. I asked him if he uses Facebook or real people to get off, and he promised me that he didn't, not knowing what I already knew. I said I know it is awkward, but you can tell me anything, and he still denied it. So I told him to delete the girl, the messages, and showed him this thread. We have not spoken much since, and I am struggling to not feel worthless and get past this. He has deleted his ex and 7 other girls on his Facebook, and I'm guessing he also had nudes of that he uses. So he not only masturbated to his ex's nudes, but lied to my face. Okay, alright. Let's start somewhere a little bit indirect. Let's talk about the fact that they've just had a baby. They're not having much sex after the baby. That is completely normal. The vagina has been through a lot during childbirth, and women are not in the mood to have sex after giving birth, even for months or potentially years afterwards. I think contributing to the physical toll of the birth process is also just the general lack of sleep. People get baby brain and they're just so tired and sort of stressed from having a new baby. And there's also a massive emotional adjustment that you've got to go through. Your life was going along one direction. Suddenly you've got a child. That's a big adjustment, and it just seems like sex is a pretty common casualty when it comes to this situation. So if you're expecting a child, and you're also expecting your sex life to stay the same. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's not going to happen. It will change. It's not necessarily permanent and not necessarily going to be too much of a change, but there will be a change. And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong in your relationship. Just understand that that's completely normal. More difficult than just the lack of sex that a lot of men feel in particular is that they're not number one anymore. They're not necessarily their partner's top priority. Their child is, and that can be difficult if you were one of these men who really enjoyed having a lot of attention from your partner. Suddenly, even though you absolutely love your baby, the fact that it's getting so much more attention than you can make you feel a little bit neglected, and to not have sex, on top of that can all just add to issues. So I just hope that couples who are going into this process, please lower your expectations of yourselves and each other, and try and understand that what you're going through is a normal process and support each other. It would certainly be a shame if you took, the changes in the first year after a baby as if these were permanent changes and it was the cause of many fights. Just understand you're gonna you're gonna be masturbating a lot more just after a baby's born. So just expect that. All right. With the story itself, this girl, she has no particular issue with him looking at porn and masturbating to porn, which is really good. Not all women are like that, but I think it's really good that she understands that he might need to look at porn since, they've just had a baby. And I'm not necessarily endorsing porn use, saying he should absolutely do that. Whether or not porn is good or not, that's a big topic. Porn can be quite problematic for men, but I don't want to get into all of that. But at the very minimum, I think that it's important that women understand why men look at porn and can appreciate it, even if they don't personally look at porn. Like, that's not their personal thing. Understand that men are different. Men like variety. They're hardwired that way. It's in their brains. Look at the evolutionary psychology on the matter. Men sexually respond to novelty. I did a video on the Coolidge effect on my YouTube channel. You can check that out. It goes into all of this. And so men looking at porn is a very, very natural phenomenon. It doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong with your relationship, because people don't look at pornography in order to replace their partner. They don't really see porn actresses as like real people. They're just sort of sexual, I was going to say deities, but the better word is archetypes, sexual archetypes. They're people you can safely objectify through a computer screen. So you have no issue with porn. This girl has no issue with porn. That's fantastic. You understand that it's not about you. But we're not talking about porn here. What we're talking about is something quite different. And he's masturbating to messages or nudes of his ex-girlfriends, and I don't think that is normal. He's an interesting guy. I don't know if he's lying or not, but he says that he doesn't like porn because he finds it too fake. That's possible. There are men out there like that. There are lots of men who don't use porn. There's an overwhelming majority of men who do use porn, but, he might be one of those guys who's in that minority. But he still likes masturbating to images of other women. He just doesn't like porn because they're fake, or what I would guess is he doesn't have any kind of emotional connection to these women. He likes to masturbate to real women. I don't know how common this is. I don't think it's massively common. I think in the story, she said that he had to delete 7 different women, so it's clearly a big habit for him. I would be fascinated to speak to him and to actually come to understand the psychology of how this particular sexual predilection came about. But to me, what this behavior indicates is that what he's going through is not just sexual. This is not just about releasing some sexual frustration and getting his jollies. This is, in a sense, a type of emotional cheating. And I think that it would be just as bad, in a sense. Like, the important part is not necessarily that he's masturbating. I don't think that's the massive betrayal. If he was spending, an hour every day flicking through his phone, reading old messages of his ex, looking at pictures of these girls on Facebook, even if they're fully clothed, and wondering what might have been and fantasizing about being with them, I think that would be just as bad, or if not worse potentially, than just having some late night fun with your own hand. It's interesting to see this is really affecting this woman. You can see it in the story, and it's understandable because what we know from evolutionary psychology, from the scientific research that's been done, is that men and women are scared of two different types of cheating, and it's very, very gender specific. For men are scared of being sexually cheated on. That is the biggest fear. And from an evolutionary perspective, it makes complete sense, because if your partner is having sex with another man, then she's likely to get pregnant with his child, and then you're going to be stuck raising somebody else's child. This is a child that doesn't have your genes. You have no real, evolutionary instinct to look after that child. And so the idea that she's had sex with somebody else infuriates men. It's like the ultimate kind of betrayal, because the potential for you to waste so much of your time, energy, and resources on on a project that's really got nothing to do with you, a child, that is terrifying for most men. But it's not the same for women. Sexual cheating obviously is not fantastic. Women don't love being sexually cheated on. But the number one fear is emotional cheating. So a lot of women, they did a study on this, and they found that when women were presented with a choice on whether or not they have their partner have completely meaningless sex with somebody, like a hooker, and not tell their partner, or they were to have an emotional affair with somebody who they spent, hours with every single week, divulged intimate secrets, and were really friendly with, it was actually the second one that was a lot more frightening for women. It was the emotional cheating that was scary. And from an evolutionary perspective, we know that this is the case because women, it's hardwired into them to depend upon men in order to get resources. I know in our modern society with welfare systems and etc., that's not necessarily the case, but that doesn't mean that our underlying brain, instincts have changed. Women are still hardwired to be frightened that if a man is developing a strong relationship with another woman, that he's going to run off with her, and that's going to mean less resources for her, less resources for her children, and potential, death from starvation or being attacked by somebody else, because he's not around to protect her. So this is a big deal for her. I loved the expression that she used. What was it? Emotional fueled fapping. That just captures it perfectly. That's what he's engaging in. This is emotional fueled fapping. That is just brilliant. And it's clearly a big deal because he lied about it. He absolutely lied. And the temptation whenever you catch somebody lying is to just jump to the simplest explanation. Oh, he's a terrible person and he's a liar, so whatever, just move on. But obviously there's more to the story because this girl is with him. She obviously likes him. She likes him enough to have had a child with him. Like she's given away her body, her youth to this particular man. She's invested in this person. So he's not obviously going to be just a complete write-off as a person. He's lied, yes, but there's a couple of different reasons why he could have done that. So, yeah, the first reason is that he's just a bad person. Like, he has a personality disorder, and he just doesn't care about people. And if it's expedient for him, he'll lie to get away with it. There are people out there like that, regrettably so. There are sociopathic and psychopathic individuals and just people with general personality disorders who are a lot more flexible with the truth than they should be. And it's possible that he's one of these people. Or it's also possible that he's generally a good person who doesn't lie, and what she has encountered in this particular instance is something that he finds hugely embarrassing, and he's really, really ashamed of. And so, while he'd ordinarily come clean about something, this particular behavior that he's been engaging in is incredibly embarrassing for him, and that's what's prompted this particular lie. He may have lied for some other reasons as well. He might have wanted to protect the woman, If he's not attracted to her at the moment because of her post-baby body, maybe he lied because he didn't want to hurt her feelings. Or maybe it is about him, and he's just desperately unhappy in his relationship. I mean, we don't really know this for sure, but what he realizes is that this behavior that he's been doing, masturbating to pictures of other women that he used to be with, that is that's inextricably linked with his dissatisfaction with his current relationship, and he's scared to admit about what he's been doing because it's going to start a conversation that he's not ready to have, and that's possible. And it's interesting to consider these possibilities because if this man is not a liar, then the fact that he has made this lie shows how significant this conversation will be for him. But I think that that's absolutely essential to do. I don't really blame you for going through the internet and looking up his history. I think that if you do that and you don't find anything, then you should feel ashamed of yourself for the lack of trust. But if you suspect somebody of wrongdoing and then you look into it and you break some privacy rules, but then you were absolutely vindicated in that, I don't think that that's as bad anymore. Like, yeah, I had a right to be suspicious. You were doing something you shouldn't have been doing. So I don't have a problem with doing that. Obviously, there's a conversation that needs to be had, and I hope that these people have a good enough communication skills that they can get through that. If you're in a situation like this where a really big conversation needs to be had and you don't feel confident in your skills, absolutely see a therapist, see a professional. It doesn't mean that you necessarily need to go and see them once a week or that you're in therapy or anything like that, but having a professional communicator who's understanding the psychology of what's going on is absolutely essential if you want to navigate that situation correctly. And if you're skeptical about therapy and you don't really believe what I'm talking about, I encourage you to check out a podcast by Esther Perel, who she wrote a book that I read a while ago. Really good book, but I can't recall the name of it. But Esther Perel, she has a podcast where you actually listen in on couples therapy that she's conducting, and you can see how many times the conversation would have devolved into point scoring, name calling, and they wouldn't have gotten anywhere, and the relationship would have stuck on freeze. Nobody would have gotten anything better. Nothing important was going to get said if it wasn't for her and her really skillful navigating those murky waters and keeping them on track. Honestly, the difference between having a therapist there and not having them there could mean a difference of a 10-year stalemate in your relationship. And life is short, life is precious. You do not have time to mess around with grudge holding and conversations that should be had that you're not having. So, if you find yourself in this situation, swallow your pride, get a therapist to facilitate that conversation. Your future happy self will thank you for it. But yeah, ultimately, in conclusion, I do think that this does indicate that there's a problem in their relationship. The fact that he's doing this, the fact that there were 7 other girls, probably means that he's not, interested in specifically cheating on you, or he's wanting to get back together with, one particular girl. This is it's a kind of a kink for him, or a particular sexual preference. It's a form of escapism. And it's really, really interesting. And I think that in a conversation, you'll be able to get to the bottom of it. And that's what the goal should be from here. Is the goal should always be to understand. All right, so that was that story. Let's see what people in the comments section thought about that. First comment: lying is my hill to die on. What's yours? Well, I mean, that's within your right. That is a lot of upvotes, that one. There's like 600 upvotes. But I would be extremely cautious about throwing stones in glass houses. The amount of people who can honestly say they've never been so embarrassed or ashamed of their behavior that they've never told a lie to get out of it would be very, very small. So unless you're perfect, you shouldn't hold people to ridiculously high standards. Lying is your hill to die on. What does that mean? Does that mean that because he lied, he's completely unredeemable in your eyes? I don't think that kind of moral absolutism actually helps anybody. And this is coming from somebody who never lies. I never lie. And as I've spoken about this before on my YouTube channel, I don't lie because I'm trying to be pious or morally superior to other people. I just don't like how I feel when I lie. So it feels better to tell the truth. There's no lies to keep track of. I tried lying when I was a young kid. And when I was a teenager, I experimented with it, and I just didn't found that it worked for me. It didn't make my life easier. Truth made it easier. I think that's actually universal. Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. So yeah, don't lie, but also don't get too judgmental. I mean, they're in a relationship. They've got a child with each other. Can you really afford, when you're in a vulnerable position like that, with a newborn baby, and you want to save your relationship, to get all up on a high horse about a lie? That's not helpful. Don't get judgmental. Get compassionate. Swallow your pride, swallow your hurt, and try and understand where they're coming from. Because a good relationship is not, in competition with your partner. It's in cooperation with your partner. You got to be on the same team. All right, let's look at comment number 2. I'm down on lying, but lying about the stuff to which you fap seems like the most understandable lying. My wife and I are pretty open about stuff, but I'd be embarrassed if she knew every weird thing I've looked at to turn me on. And if for some reason I was craving a lookie at nude pictures of my ex, that is something I'd be even more inclined to deny than the other stuff, so as to not hurt her feelings. But then I'd delete my damn browser history. Or at least take the computer away from the bedroom with its paper-thin walls. That's a really funny comment. That's quite thought-provoking too, because there's definitely some truth to that. Do you really, want your partner to know every single one of your kinks? Would you sit down with your partner and then go through your favorite pornographic videos and like have them see, without any context, basically what turns you on? Or maybe you provide lots of context that might make it worse. You actually explain what's turning you on about that. I think if you can do that, it's an interesting idea. If you can actually sit down with your partner and show them porn that turns you on and explain why it turns you on, that'd probably bring you a lot closer. I think I had a friend who did that and he found it extremely successful. So, but yeah, I mean, that's for people who are really committed to the truth. Everyday people who are gonna lie every now and then about things. Yeah, the stuff that you masturbate to, that might be it. And I always think it's interesting here that to what degree do you really owe somebody the truth when it comes to the contents of your mind? You owe truth to yourself and to be right to somebody, and you owe it to yourself to choose someone who you're comfortable sharing with. But is somebody else, just because you're in a relationship with them, entitled to that knowledge? Like, are they entitled to it? Do they deserve, or are they justified in feeling angry with you if you don't share that kind of thing? I think that there is a case to be made in the moral code of some people that they're allowed to keep some of their feelings, some of their sexual desires private. Like they're entitled to some privacy there. So that's an interesting perspective. He could easily have kind of come back, and maybe this is an issue of frame of she showed him those browser history that she saw, and he said to her, I apologize for lying, but this is private, and I understand that hurts you, but it's important for me to have some things that are private. This is my sexuality, and it belongs to me, and while I'll do my best to lie to you in the future, I do ask that you respect my privacy. That's important to me. That would be an interesting conversation if it went that way. Yeah, very thought-provoking. I'm going to think about that a little bit more. Sorry I can't provide a definitive conclusion on that matter here, but hopefully in listening to these various perspectives, you, my audience, have some thoughts on that one, and it's brought some clarity to your own perspective. Let's move on to comment 3. I fail to see how a multiple year-long and childbearing relationship is doomed by a father committing masturbation to an item outside of the list that I approve. Yeah, it's interesting. There's another person who's sort of on the, this is not a big deal, there's too much at stake, and I very much agree with that. A multiple year-long and childbearing relationship, regardless of how she proceeds, you can't get too simplistic about this kind of thing. She is vulnerable, and God, the divorce rates and the split-up rates and the single motherhood rates are so high in the Western world at the moment, and it's not like we don't know how damaging single parenthood is for children. The statistics are raw and devastating. Children who grew up in single-parent households are not doing well. It's one of the strongest predictors of delinquent behavior in the future. So before you kick your, baby's father out of the house because you're so sure that that's the right thing to do, stop and reconsider. Is this really that big of a deal? Sure, it's warranting a conversation, but I certainly wouldn't think that it's anything to break up with him over or anything like that. Next comment. Imagine if the child is a teen guy, beating it like crazy all the time, and then you have to explain to him that he is fatherless because your father's a lying prick and masturbated to his ex, which was too much to bear for me. Well, that was a very convoluted sentence, but yeah, that's the same sentiment. That you can't just make your child fatherless over something so small, and I agree with that. Last comment. Just leave him. Meh. Even if he is cheating or not, fuck it. You have one life, you're going to die one day. Just do what makes you happy, fuck it. Wish him the best, all positive vibes. If you're not happy, you gotta put yourself around good energy. you're going to feel so liberated. Ooh, I don't like that. I very much disagree with that. I don't think she's going to feel liberated if she leaves him. I think she's going to feel alone. She's going to be struggling. She's going to feel resentful and bitter. And she's going to have difficulty finding another man because she's already had one man's child. There does get a point sometimes when one partner is acting so terribly that you do need to leave them. That does need to be an option available to you. It's not like divorce is bad in every single instance, but my God, if people after they've had children are just willing to end relationships over the smallest of things, then we are doomed as a society. We've got to stop that. More needs to be. There's a kind of myth, I'll call it a myth, going like a cultural attitude that's floating around the Western world that to leave your man is empowered and you're a woman and you can do whatever you want and la la la, go woman, girl power, feminism, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think they're being honest to women about just how hard it's going to be a single mother, and that's not empowering to women. The reality of the situation is that life without a man, without your child's father, is going to be way harder, really, really difficult. So please don't encourage people to leave their partners, willy-nilly. Even when it comes to things like cheating, there's always a complex story behind it. And I think you should explore lots of different avenues before you just go to the, I don't need him, especially if there are children involved. All right, a bit of a rant there. That's the end of that particular story. Let's move on to the third one. Just quickly, if you want to see me cover a particular story from Reddit, or if you have your own story that you want me to talk about, some of them are appropriate for the podcast. Some that I receive I don't think are appropriate. I'll just chat with you privately. But if you want to do that, just send me a personal email. The best place to find my personal email is through my Patreon page. That's also a great way to support this podcast and also my YouTube channel. My Patreon it doesn't just sit there. It's not just collecting money. I'm absolutely active on there. I post there every single day. Sometimes they're my thoughts. There could be books I'm reading, shows I'm watching, movies that I liked, articles I read, YouTube videos that I find. It's kind of like a window into my life. I don't really get too personal on the internet. I don't like to talk about myself or give away details about my personal life. So Patreon is where I get as personal as possible. It's a sort of perspective on on where I am at and what I'm doing. So that's where you can find my personal email address, where you can send me questions. I chat to lots of people over email. I really enjoy it. It's not particularly profitable use of my time because I never charge people for it, but I chat to people over Skype, over email. It's really good and enjoyable. It's important for me to always be getting feedback from people about relationships. It's all just feeding into my deeper research so that I can speak on stories like this with a certain degree of competence. So yeah, if you want to support me, check out my Patreon page. There should be a link in the description box of the YouTube below. Or if you're listening to this on audio, just type Alexander Grace and Patreon into Google and you should find me. Although my content is considered R-rated, so I think I might be private. You might need to click on a direct link. So go onto my YouTube channel. You'll find it there. Anyway, enough plugging my Patreon. Let's move on to the third story. And this is our title. I, 20-year-old female, feel like I'm competing with my entire college campus for my boyfriend, 25-year-old male, and it drives me bonkers. I go to a very small college. Student body is around 500-ish in New England. We were historically a women's college. In modern times, we are officially co-ed, but we are still kind of seen as the girls' school, and the student body is still like 3 out of 4 girls. My boyfriend arrived here last year. He was just out of the army, and he wanted a degree and a low-stress job to put some money in his pocket while he got the degree. He found both of those things here. He was an army mechanic and got hired by the university to take care of the cars and trucks and golf carts the university owns. After getting hired, the college has basically used him as a general handyman for the vehicles, fixing things in the dorms, hanging signs, basically whatever random stuff they need a body for. He doesn't seem to mind. He says it's the easiest paycheck he's ever gotten, and they work around his class schedule. I started dating him about 4 months ago. By that time, he was already pretty well known as that cute guy who comes around and fixes stuff for us, to about 450 college girls. I really didn't think it would bother me because I felt like it was kind of inevitable given the demographics around here, but it's really getting to me. Since he is seen as Mr. Fix-It, a lot of girls just ignore the whole work order process and approach him directly. We can't walk around campus without some girl coming up to us to bat her eyelashes and ask him, hey, the hinges on my doors are coming off in my dorm room. Can you fix that? And I wouldn't mind so much, but it seems like everyone has to be real flirty about it for some reason, even when I'm standing right there. We go out to the nearby town. Groups of girls will walk past going, oh, hey, brackets boyfriend, thanks for fixing the light in the day room. I know of at least twice someone straight propositioned him for sex while he was working on something in her room. Wow. To his credit, he turned them down and let me know about it, but it really doesn't help my mood on the matter. My boyfriend is a good guy. I don't believe he would cheat on me, but my friend's boyfriend was also a good guy, and she didn't believe he would cheat on her, and I spent last night holding her while she cried on my shoulder that her boyfriend cheated on her. So I've spent all day in a mood where I may bite the head off the next girl who bats her eyes at my man and puts on her bedroom voice asking him to come by and rerun a stupid light switch or something. I don't know what to do. I don't like feeling anxious all the time. I don't like the little ball I feel in the pit of my stomach when I know he has to swing by some girl's room to fix what the fuck ever. How do I deal with this? TLDR. My boyfriend is the handyman at my primarily girls' school. I feel like girls are constantly batting their eyelashes at him, and after my friend was cheating on terrible sentence here, my apologies. After my friend got cheated on, my anxiety is overwhelming me. Help. All right. There is so much to discuss in this particular story. I really enjoyed reading that. This guy is great. I love the sound of this guy. He's in the army. I mean, that's awesome. That is very attractive to women. You know, he's disciplined, he's masculine, he's capable. I think a lot of guys, when they come out of the army, they feel this, an increased kind of sexual presence, like around women. On top of that, he's an engineer and he fixes things. Women love men who can fix things. You know, a lot of women just think that's what men are good for. And when they see a guy like fix stuff, they don't understand any of it, but it's that, you know, it's a great way of demonstrating competence and superiority. You know, to be an engineer who's capable of just fixing stuff, this guy is an alpha male. And what's particularly interesting to explore in this topic is he's what I'd call a contextual alpha male. So what is a contextual alpha male? Well, think of it like a CEO. A CEO at his company is an alpha male, even if he's 65, fat, and balding. He's the boss, he's in charge, and he is alpha in that context. But, you know, you take him along to his wife's cooking class, and the guy doesn't even know how to poach an egg. He's not an alpha male in that situation. Nobody knows his status. He can't fire anybody there. You know, in that context, he's nothing. But, you know, in a different context, he's an alpha male. Now, look at the context that this guy from the story has found himself in. He's the handyman around this primarily female college. He's the go-to guy for fixing stuff. That is seriously alpha male. And I'm glad I came across this story because I did a video a while back on the smart way of dating. It was called Smart Men Maximize Their Strengths, or it was like Intelligent Dating, something like that. It was a while ago, about a year. And in it, I talk about the contextual alpha and how that's the smartest way to attract women into your life. That actually things like cold approach and pickup are not a particularly good investment on your return. What you want to do is create a life for yourself where you're the contextual alpha. And I had a lot of people emailing me asking, like, so what kind of situations should I be putting myself into where I am a contextual alpha male? And I struggled to think of too many, to be honest, because they just sort of, I mean, you can design them, but the good ones that I know, like the men that I know who are really good at being a contextual alpha, they just sort of fell into it. It used to be that people in their workplace were the contextual alpha, like the CEO of the company in that example I talked about. But now with Me Too and all that nonsense, you can't really translate. Sorry, I don't mean to say all of Me Too's are nonsense, but all that difficulty, all that complexity, you don't really want to be messing with the workplace in terms of meeting women. It's just not a smart thing to do. You're on your way for a sexual harassment lawsuit. The climate is not right for it. It may not be right ever again. So you can't rely on the fact that you're an alpha male at work to necessarily give you the contextual alpha male status around women. That means you're going to have to translate that into romantic success. What you really want to do is be a contextual alpha male in female-dominated areas, you know, like a dance instructor, a yoga instructor, things that typically lots of women go to. If you're the one leading the class and you do so with leadership, confidence, and competence, then women are going to find that attractive. And it's great because there are women there. You know, you could equally run I don't know, what's a male thing, like a golfing kind of clinic, and you're the alpha male there, but what's the point? You know, it's filled with 50-year-old men. You don't want to sleep with those guys. My apologies if you do want to sleep with those guys. I always assume that most of my audience is young and straight, but that might not be the case. Anyway, this is the guy I want to point to as the contextual alpha. This is absolutely incredible. He's managed to find himself in this position with a 3/4, population of women in the college. It's absolutely extraordinary. Now, he's obviously not particularly interested in exploiting this contextual alpha male status he's got. He's in a committed relationship with this girl. But if he was interested in this kind of lifestyle, he's done an amazing, amazing job to get himself into that place. And if he served the military, served his country, that seems like an adequate reward for somebody who's sacrificed that. He's a really good guy, though. Like, he doesn't cheat on his girlfriend. He was offered sex, like, straight up twice, and he tells her about it. Like, this is definitely a top tier guy. Now, what's interesting in the phenomena of a contextual alpha is what happens when you leave that context. Like, when the CEO goes to the cooking class, he's no longer the alpha male. Now, that is true to a certain extent, but it's not true in an absolute sense, because there is actually some spillover effect. So, sticking with our CEO example, if he spends, the last 30 years being the boss of his own company that he built himself, ordering people about, making high-pressure decisions, having people's respect, that is going to become a personality trait. He's just going to expect that, like that he's the sort of leader, and it's ingrained into his being now. So even when he leaves the boardroom and his office, he's still going to walk around with a certain confidence because it's kind of become part of who he is. It's made a permanent change to his mindset. And you find that what's fantastic about the contextual alpha male is it's not a waste of time if you can't maintain that context forever. Because if you have enough success in a particular environment, being that alpha male, you can, what will happen is you begin to expect success, Like this guy, he walks around, I'm sure he just assumes the women want to sleep with him, There's not that many guys to go around. He's the big man on campus. He's eventually going to just expect success. And so much of attraction and dating and pickup is about frame. Like, if you're strong enough in your frame, like you're just absolutely confident that she wants to sleep with you, that she's attracted to you, and as long as you're not socially clueless or a dick about it, you'll find a lot of the time that she'll just sort of respond to your frame, and she'll be like, wow, this guy is absolutely certain that I'm going to want to sleep with him. He must be certain for a reason. Maybe he knows how awesome he is, and I'm going to take him at his sort of word. I'm going to trust him. He seems very confident. I'll respond to that. You see this phenomenon with boys who lose their virginity really early. And I mean really early. I don't mean like 18. I mean like 13 or 14. Now, obviously, that is not great. I'm not promoting that because boys at that age are not emotionally ready to have sex. Definitely not. But it is undeniable that for guys who lose their virginity really, really early like that, to potentially like an older girl who's 16 or whatever, it does something to them. There is a permanent change that occurs, and they're not scared of girls anymore. They've already gone through the big event. They've had the sex. It's no longer such a big deal. So many guys, they'll spend, when does puberty come on for boys? Like 11 or 12. They'll spend 5 or 6 years being intensely sexually keen, and they've got all kinds of hormones raging, and they're not having sex, and they're also socially awkward because their bodies are weird and they don't know how to talk to girls. And permanently ingrained into their personality, even as an adult, is that kind of awkwardness. For a guy who conquers that really early at like 14, he doesn't have a lot of time to let that awkwardness kind of ingrain himself into his personality. He's like, nah, been there, done that. Girls, I know that. I know what's happening. I've been there. I've proved myself way before a bunch of other guys have, so I'm good. And what typically happens is he's kind of got, at least on one level, an alpha male status forever, because he's going to have a natural confidence and ease around women because he's not going to be constantly supplicating. He's already gotten that big reward. He knows that it's not a big deal. So that's just another example of when you have contextual success in the moment, it can permanently affect your mindset. And I think that this is something that men should be paying more attention to, because if you want to develop the kind of personality traits and make permanent changes to your psyche that are going to make you more attractive to women, there's nothing wrong with manipulating your life circumstances, just temporarily, potentially, but permanently if you want to, but manipulating your circumstances to give you that contextual alpha male status for a while, just so you get a taste of it. Now, maybe you've never been in the army, you're not built like this guy, you can't go to a college that's mostly women, you don't know how to fix things. If you can do all those things, hey, do what this guy's done. It's clearly working for him. Women seem to be lining up to sleep with this guy. So learn from this dude. But, a really simple one that you can do is simply go to a different country where the dating market doesn't operate the same way that it does in the West. I've never done this personally because I went to Bali, but Bali is a little bit different. But if you go to Thailand, I've done a lot of research into this because I'm fascinated with how sexual market, changes country to country. But go to Thailand and go to one of those bars like I want to call it like a hookah bar. It's like where prostitutes work, but it's not like a brothel. I wish I'd actually been to one. I could explain this a lot better. But I read this entire thread on this martial arts forum about it. It was just extraordinarily interesting. And the kind of bars where there's like go-go dancers, just like women dancing on bars. What happens is they're all prostitutes, and prostitution's not seen in the same way that it is here in the West. There's not as much stigma, and there might be 2 or 3 blokes in the bar, but there's like 15 girls, and he walks in, and then they're all rushing over to him to try and get his attention because they're desperate to make the money, so they're fighting over him. Even the guys who are old, overweight and ugly, if they've got money, the girls are going to be interested in you. And I read stories from guys who tried it for the first time. They're like, holy crap, I've spent 30 years nervous, shy, terrified, desperately trying to get a woman in a bar to talk to me, and I always felt like disgusting that no woman would ever want me, and I was so unattractive. And then I went to Thailand for 2 weeks, and I just felt like a movie star. Girls were fighting over me to have my attention. And maybe you just want to buy them drinks or give them tips. You don't necessarily want to have sex with them because, prostitution is a whole other story. But, oh man, it's so difficult to not go into prostitution. But I don't want to go on too many tangents. I'm going to really, really try and stay focused on the point that I'm making. But regardless of whether or not you want to go through with the sleeping with the girls, if you just want to enjoy some attention, just try giving them some money. And what happens is these guys, they find that it does a reset of their brain, that suddenly just to have that experience of girls fighting for your attention and desperate to be with you, to sit with you, to talk with you, when in the West, that would never happen. You're more likely to go into a bar or a nightclub and fight with 5 other guys to talk to an average-looking girl. That's a lot more likely. But in Thailand, you could have beautiful girls, 8s, 9s, 10s, fighting for your attention simply because of the currency exchange, and your money's worth so much more. And I think that there's lots of guys who don't need to do this, but if this is something you really, really want to get sorted in your life, and you just feel like you've got to change your mindset, it might be worth taking a couple of weeks off work and booking that trip to Thailand just so you can experience what it's like to be a contextual alpha male. What I'm hoping is that if you do that, it will make a permanent shift in you. You don't want to become one of those guys that just is just celibate, 11 months of the year and saves up and then goes to Thailand. Like, that's not a permanent solution to your problems. Unless you move there potentially, and to each his own, you do you. But what you really want to do is take the energy that you feel in Thailand and take that back home with you. Take that alpha male essence back home, because everyone's going to love you so much more. People like confidence. The women that you interact with, if you're confident to be around them and you're not just sort of shy and apologizing for your existence, you're just improving everybody's lives. You're more attractive. You're going to have a lot more fun. So take the context, but try and cement it deeply into yourself. Make it a part of your personality. Wow, that was a big tangent, but I think that was important to talk about. So hopefully some people out there listened to that and got something out of it. But let's stop talking about this guy. I'm as impressed as I am with this guy and the life that he's able to create for himself. It's probably what makes it particularly impressive is I did try and sit down and think, well, what would be the absolute ideal contextual alpha male status? And this guy working in a college with all these beautiful young girls around, that is about as close to perfect as I could have ever come up with. So that got me particularly excited. But I think we should actually talk about her because she is the person writing the story and she's the one who wants advice. So the story, it shows a number of things. The first one is that men are not the only people who objectify the other sex. Women are clearly objectifying this guy. So it's not just men doing this. Women objectify men, and he's an easy person to objectify because of his position, his job. He's not so much of a real person. He's kind of a symbol, like the fix-it man, and that really helps to objectify him. And I think the fact that he's in a relationship, in all honesty, might also contribute to him being objectified by all these other women because he's unavailable. And in a sense, that makes him a little bit safer to flirt with. I might be wrong on that one, but I think that there's a certain... When a man is unattainable, it's a little bit safer to sexualize or objectify him. I wonder if girls would agree with me, but that's my sense of it. You also see what I like to call girl violence in this story. And girl violence isn't physical, so it's not really violent, but women are generally... Well, from an evolutionary perspective, women have not been predisposed to get into physical confrontations because they're so likely to lose because they're not as physically strong as men. So women have expressed violence in other ways. And like this story of a girl coming up to her boyfriend in front of her and batting her eyelids and talking all sexy in her bedroom voice to him, that is an act of aggression. And that's really interesting. I think that the ways that women kind of compete with each other and the kind of violence that you see and the ways they express aggression to a man, where aggression is reasonably like straightforward, we're going to have tough words or we're going to throw down. That's basically as far as it gets. To learn all of the different layers of aggression that women are capable of is extraordinarily interesting. There's that book that Mean Girls, remember that Lindsay Lohan movie from like 15 years ago, Mean Girls? That was based on a book that was called Queen Bees and Wannabes. And I read that, and I read a couple of other stories like that back in 2011. Not the stories, other books. And it was all about female bullying in schools. And the psychology of it was absolutely gripping. I learned a lot about female nature from reading those books. So if that's not something you've delved into, check out books like that. Try and understand how women compete and how they show violence and aggression to each other. It's really interesting. And talk to women about this. Talk to your girlfriend, your female friends, your mother even, because they'll have interesting stories. And I think you'll learn a lot about women. So if that's not something you're aware of, get informed because it's fucking fascinating. Apologies for swearing. All right. What about the fact that two girls just offered to sleep with him? I know I'm not talking about the real girl yet, but there's so much in this story I want to talk about. Two girls, just because he was in the bedroom fixing something, they wanted to sleep with him right there. I mean, this story right here, it should put to end this myth that men are the only ones who are, shallow and superficial and are interested in unattached sex. If any woman tells you that that's an exclusively male phenomena, do not believe her. She's lying. Women are absolutely capable of it. They're not capable of it to the same degree that men are, because men are not particularly discriminating when it comes to their partners. Like, a lot of guys will just have sex with anybody who's half decent looking and up for it. Women are a lot more choosy about who they'll do it with. But if it's the right guy, like if he's alpha enough, women will absolutely have one-night stands and unattached sex. Because from an evolutionary perspective, women have two strategies when it comes to dating. There's the short-term strategy of having a one-night stand with the alpha male guy, Chad, get his good genes. Like, I know his babies are going to be extremely strong because he's clearly such a good-looking, awesome alpha male dude. Like, I just want to have sex with that guy. That's one strategy. The other strategy is to lock down the guy who's obviously going to be a good father and provider. And there's a certain degree of paranoia I've seen some people... fueling that says that all women are interested in sleeping with the alpha male guy and then tricking a beta male guy into providing for the children. That's not the case. What women mostly want to do is find a guy who's the complete package. They're sort of, I don't want to say greedy, or maybe a little bit greedy, but that look, it's just an ideal. That would be the best case scenario for them. But my point is that absolutely women are capable of having unattached, unemotional, short-term sex if it's the right context for it. Now, not every woman will do this, and they might have some kind of emotions. Probably what they're hoping is that he's going to be the provider as well. But failing that, knowing that he can't be the complete package, they'll settle for just the one night stand. So if he's an alpha male, women will sleep with him quickly, potentially, in order to, at a subconscious level, fulfill that biological and evolutionary drive to secure his good genes. And it's important that men understand that women really do have two completely different sets of rules when it comes to men. Now, if you're interested in a woman you've been dating and she's making you wait for sex, you might be just, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's always making other men wait for sex. It could mean that she just doesn't see you as that alpha male guy. She's screening you as a potential provider male. You're not the guy to have the one night stand with. You're not high value enough. Your genes aren't glorious and desirable enough. You're the guy who she wants the long-term partnership with. Now, don't get paranoid. Women are potentially, gosh, I always have to be so careful when I talk about this because people are inclined to paranoia. I'm not saying that every woman is going to do this and every woman does this. Women are capable of overcoming their instincts, but they are, driven to respond sexually to a high status male. That is their instincts. And you should understand that, just like it's your instinct to impregnate every fertile woman that you come across. But it doesn't mean that you're not capable of overcoming your instincts, and she is not incapable of overcoming her instincts. So understand that potentially she's making you wait and she didn't make that other guy wait. Well, that's a problem because it shows how she sees you. But the very fact that she's making you wait doesn't mean that she hasn't also made every other man wait. But I think it's something that's worth talking about. If she is making you wait before sleeping with you, quiz her about her sexual past. Has this been the same for other guys? And if there's been a change, talk about that. That's an important, very interesting conversation to have. Like, why is there one rule for a different type of guy and a different rule for you? You might not like the answer, and you might not get a truthful answer. It depends how high quality the woman is. But very, very interesting. Just remember, cheating is not as common as people make it out to be. Now, if you've been cheated on, it's easy to start feeling paranoid. And it's clearly happened in this particular story. Like, she's comforting her friend who just got cheated on, and she's got cheating and infidelity on the brain. And that's why she's paranoid that this guy is going to get swept off by one of these women. Like, it's on his mind. And this is what happens. It's a confirmation bias. If you see infidelity and adultery in one part of your life, you're going to start to see it in other parts. But statistically, and the research does not back up this idea that cheating is particularly common. There have been numerous studies on this, and it's important that people know the facts about this so you can come back on them. I did a video on this on YouTube. I did a bunch of research, and across the board, they basically found that the amount of men who've cheated on their wives is like 20%, which is a lot, but it's not that much. 1 in 5 men cheat. For women, it's even lower. 13% of married women have cheated on their partners, which obviously is not great, but really that's pretty low. It means that on the whole, statistically, you're not that likely to get cheated on. So don't get particularly paranoid. But this girl is paranoid. She's in the story. Her friends just got cheated on. She's in her mindset. So what is the solution for her? She's got this alpha male guy. She's stressed about other women who want to take him away from her. What should she do? I actually think that the problem here is that she's just not confident enough in herself. She's managed to secure a really high value guy, and she's stressed. She doesn't necessarily think that she's good enough for him, and that's the source of her anxiety. The problem isn't in the situation. It's really in her. Because think of it this way. If she was hot shit, like she was a really top tier girl, high value, high sexual market value, then this wouldn't bother her because she'd be completely confident that he couldn't do better than her. So what you're really seeing is that she is nervous about the fact that she's batting above her weight, that she's with a guy who's better than her, that she's not really good enough for him. And that doesn't leave her a lot of options, because, it's a temporary Band-Aid solution if they was to move away to a different college or, to get out of college altogether, and she just locks him up and, and keeps him at home. So she never needs to stress about this. But I think that this situation isn't necessarily creating an anxiety. I think it's provoking a pre-existing anxiety. And so her two options are really to get over it, to raise her own sexual market value, become a higher quality woman so that she is confident in her desirability and that he's not going to go and cheat out on her. That's one option. Or the other option is to let him go, because if she tries to hold on to him while remaining paranoid and underconfident, she's eventually going to have a psychological crack. Emotionally, she's going to break at one point and have a freak out and yell at some girl who doesn't deserve it, or accuse him of misbehavior even when it's not justified. That's what's waiting for her unless she sort of deals with this. So what's the moral of the story? I guess be with somebody who you feel comfortable you can hold on to. And if you are batting above your weight, try and raise your own sexual market value. That's good. It's good to date people who are really fantastic and high value people, because it does inspire you to become the best version of yourself. So look, this is potentially just a temporary paranoia she's going after hearing about her friend getting cheated on. But hopefully there is a solution along the line for her. If not, I think that she's going to lose this guy. And then this guy's going to have a whole lot of fun. See, I'm still thinking about how great this guy's status is in this situation. All right, I don't want to go back on that tangent. Let's look at the comments. First comment. I kept thinking, oh, poor original poster has a boyfriend that is hardworking, honest, clearly hot as fuck since the entire campus is after him. Must be a rough life, lol. Yeah, that's right. First world problems, right? Yeah, she's lucked out, absolutely. But you don't get anything for free. You get what you earn, basically, and there's a hidden cost to being with a guy this fantastic, and that cost is the paranoia and jealousy that she's feeling. She may well discover inside herself that she's actually more comfortable being with somebody who's more on her level of the same value. And I think there's actually research to back this up. I haven't read the original study, but I've had numerous people quote this to me, that one of the best predictors for long-term marriage, like whether or not two people stay together, is whether or not they're of equal attractiveness. And it just tends to be that way. Like, people will find somebody who's equally beautiful to themselves, equally handsome, because I think you feel more comfortable around somebody like that. And you see it. Gorgeous celebrity couples, they find other gorgeous celebrities, and you see those overweight people in the supermarket holding hands, and they're both pretty ugly, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. They'll be with each other. And it's because people don't want to spend their lives paranoid and jealous, and it's just easier to be with somebody who's more on your on your level, I guess. Interesting thought. Let's move on to comment number 2. I don't know. I mean, all the girls think he's hot shit, but you've got to bring him down a notch. If he thinks you are whipped, he'll be more emboldened to cheat. Oh, that's dark. No, I don't like that at all. In case you didn't pick up on that, what she's saying is you've got to bring him down a notch, otherwise he's going to think he's hot shit and he's going to be emboldened to cheat. That is terrible advice. I don't like that. Whoever wrote that is a very dark psychology. If you're dating somebody who's really fantastic and you want to prevent them from not cheating, the correct course of action is to improve yourself. It's not to manipulate him into being a worse version of himself, or to undermine his confidence in some way so he thinks he needs you. That is some sociopathic shit right there. Never engage in that kind of thing. I've seen people lash out in the short term and try and do that. Like, if they're feeling scared and vulnerable, they might say something in the heat of an argument to try and undermine the other person's confidence, where what they're really saying is, I'm scared you'll leave me because you're actually fantastic, and I don't want you to know how fantastic you are because I'm feeling vulnerable right now. Occasional slip-ups like that are understandable. They're not fantastic, but my God, if you're consciously going about manipulating your partner so that they don't realize that they can do better, that is dark. Seek help. All right. Last comment. Let's just do one more. It's been a long podcast. My throat's getting sore. Last comment. I think you're projecting because of what your friend has been through. Ultimately, it takes 2 to cheat. If you trust your boyfriend, then you have nothing to worry about. If your boyfriend is comfortable, maybe walk around campus holding hands or otherwise showing obvious affection. Some people are always going to flirt, but this could help clarify things for people who don't know that he's taken. Yeah, I guess so. I think that I heard Jeffrey Miller, the evolutionary psychologist, talk about how hand-holding actually evolved as a behavior to signal to other people that you're in a monogamous relationship with somebody and to back off. And it's interesting that that behavior potentially developed, like hundreds of thousands of years ago to your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother, and they did that. And it's still kind of our instinct now to hold hands just to sort of show other people, hey, this is my man, or this is my girl, back off, this person's taken. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. That's pretty good advice. I mean, I think the ideal solution, honestly, is for this woman to get in touch with her bisexuality and then use this amazing man as a tool to get gorgeous women into bed to have threesomes with you. I'm kidding. I'm kind of kidding. I do know that that's what some women do. I must have been listening to something recently, but some women there know they're with really high value guys, and they're like, it's great how attractive it is to other women because I'm bisexual and I just get to have all these amazing threesomes. I mean, that's how to turn a problem into a solution, am I right? All right. Enough jokes. That's the end. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Relationships on Reddit podcast with Alexander Grace. Come back next week. We'll have 3 more stories, a lot more insight, a lot more laughs. Thank you again to Man-Made Media. Make sure to check out their video on booty calls, the science of booty calls. Get informed on the science. Make sure that your perspective on gender dynamics and relationships is not just opinion. It is based on fact. Watching their videos will do so. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to support me, check out my Patreon page. Post there every day. Love to have you as part of the community. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you again next time.